So good evening, everyone. My name is Ruby White, and I'm talking to you here from BodyWhys. And I suppose if you haven't heard of BodyWhys before, we're the national voluntary organisation in Ireland for eating disorders. So this evening, we'll touch a little bit briefly about eating disorders, about body image, and of course, about the services that we provide and support that we provide here at BodyWhys. So let's jump straight in about eating disorders. So what is an eating disorder? Eating disorders can be incredibly complex, and they can also be very difficult to understand. They can be complicated to understand, of course, from the outside looking in perspective, but also for a person themselves, it can be quite complicated to understand if they have an eating disorder. Even though they are complicated, eating disorders need to be taken, of course, very seriously. They are a serious, life-threatening psychological disorder. So as you can see here, eating disorders can affect the way we think, the way we feel, and of course, how we behave. Sometimes we hear about the internal eating disorder voice, which a person with an eating disorder, it can often be impossible for them to ignore that voice. And this voice can sometimes distort their thoughts. These negative thoughts can sometimes present as an over-concern for someone's body image and their body weight, maybe their body shape. And in turn, this can of course affect their self-esteem. These thoughts can often influence our behavior, and that means how we act. These behaviors are often a clue for what's really going on deep down internally for a person. And this can influence disordered actions and behaviors around food and eating. And some of these disordered actions might include binging, overeating, restricting their food intake, even over-exercising and sometimes purging, just to name a few. So these thoughts and behaviors, of course, they influence how we feel, and that means our emotions. An eating disorder is a coping mechanism for dealing with emotions. Sometimes the eating disorder can help distract, numb, and overpower these unwanted negative internal emotions. And as you can see on the last bullet point there, it's not just about food, it's a way of coping. So on this slide, we take a look at the prevalence in Ireland. You'll see here that it's estimated that 188,895 people in Ireland will experience an eating disorder at some point in their life. And that's according to the HSE 2018 statistics. And below you will see approximately 1,757 new cases present every year. And that's in a large age bracket from the age of 10 to 49. And before we move on to anything else, I want to highlight to you some myths around eating disorders. So firstly, eating disorders are not a lifestyle choice. You do not choose to have an eating disorder, and you certainly do not make a conscious choice to have an eating disorder. They're not just a teenage thing. They can present at any age throughout life. We do know the average prevalence onset of eating disorders may reside mainly in adolescence, more specifically between the ages of 15 up to 24. And this is generally due to a lot of big life changes that you can think might be happening during this period in anyone's life. But it does not mean that eating disorders are confined to adolescence. They're not just a faddy diet. They're a serious mental illness. It affects someone's sense of self, their self-esteem, and of course their self-worth. And they do need appropriate help and treatment. Next, they're not just a phase. As you can see, they're much more serious, they're much more complex. And as I stated before, they do need appropriate treatment, professional help and treatment. They're not just for women. Eating disorders, of course, affect men too. They can affect women, men, boys, girls at any age. Adult men actually account for 1/4 of the cases presented of anorexia. And if we look at binge eating disorder, we see almost an equal spread between both female and male cases. And last on our list there, they're not forever. They do not have to be forever. People with eating disorders can and do recover, and they do get better. So what causes an eating disorder? And unfortunately, there is no one specific cause. As I stated previously, eating disorders are incredibly complex, and so are the causes. Causal factors, of course, are consistently being reviewed and researched, but generally speaking, there's no one thing in particular that influences the onset of an eating disorder. There should not be any blame. As you can see here, blame is not constructive, and parents do not cause eating disorders. So moving on, there can be some risk factors that can influence the onset of an eating disorder. And this for the person can be either internal or external, or maybe a combination of both. So if we look at the left-hand column on our risk factors list, internal risk factors for those who may be susceptible to an eating disorder can of course include, their personality traits. Sometimes they might have an all or nothing thinking process or personality. As you can see there down the list, we have low self-esteem. And then of course, this can also be linked to the next bullet point there, body dissatisfaction. And that of course is a negative self-body image. Maybe they could have an overly anxious personality, or even often we see that sometimes people who are perfectionists or high achievers might be susceptible to an eating disorder. And if we look at the right-hand side here to our external environment, so the world we live in can also contribute to the onset of an eating disorder. And number one, if we look at socio-cultural factors, specifically social media in this day and age, and the pressures of social media and fashion, that can be a huge risk factor. Maybe a big change in somebody's life. That could be a traumatic event. You can see there down the end of the list, maybe a history of abuse, relationship difficulties, family difficulties, friendships, anything. And we often see two major risk factors today combining together. Could be, dieting, and the combination of dieting and low self-esteem. So if you look at this slide here, we look at the types of eating disorders. Now you'll see on this slide, I have listed a few of the most prevalent eating disorders. You might have heard of some of them, you might have not. We have anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, ARFID, orthorexia. However, this is just to name a few, and there's a lot more that should be added to this list. I'm not going to delve too deep into each individual eating disorder, but if you want to see the different types and explore the different characteristics, I've linked our website down the end there, so www.bodywhys.ie, and it will be under the drop down of about eating disorders on our homepage. So as I said, you will see an extensive specific list of different types of eating disorders, and as you click into each of them, you'll see specific characteristics for each individual eating disorder. And sometimes you might notice even an overlap in characteristics and signs and symptoms of different eating disorders as well. So how do we spot signs of someone who might have an eating disorder? There are four aspects that we must look out for in a person. And as you can see here, we have thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physical, their physicality, their appearance. So if we look at the left-hand column first, the thoughts and feelings, distorted thoughts that can often be led by the internal eating disorder voice that we mentioned previously. It can often influence the rules that we make around food and our exercise regimes. This can, of course, have a knock-on effect on your mood, so your feelings, your emotions. They might be a little bit more stressed than usual, causing high stress situations. And this stress can often be exacerbated by a difficulty with coping with change. On the other hand, on the right-hand side, you'll see behaviors and the physicalities. These are often the more obvious signs that you will notice first. So we have food restriction, and sometimes skipping meals, skipping meal times, over or excessive exercise patterns and behaviors. And sometimes you'll see that they might avoid social situations that are surrounded by food, like a lot of social situations are. So like family meals, going out for dinner, because this might make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. And of course, these behavioral changes will influence the physical changes. And you might notice a considerable change in somebody's weight within a shorter period of time than normal. They might feel cold a lot or all of the time due to a dramatic, usually weight loss or restricting food. And if we look at the food restriction, that will obviously have an effect on the energy levels of somebody. And a sign and symptom can often be that they might notably be a lot more fatigued and lethargic than usual. So we're going to look at body image during this slide, and body image describes how we feel about our own appearance, how we think and feel about how we look. Are we comfortable with how we look? And it's our perceived perception of how others think that we look. Our Youth Development Officer, Fiona Flynn, has done extensive work on the influences of negative body image, specifically in teenagers and youth groups. And results showed that social media, of course, was the largest pressure being put on young people today surrounding their body image. Other influencing factors include, obviously the media, the TV, magazines, images you see on the website, on the internet, and obviously we see sometimes a comparison to our peers or a comparison of ourselves towards people that we're surrounded by every day. So our self-perceived body image can, of course, affect our self-esteem, either positively or negatively. And this, of course, depends on the view that you might have of your own appearance. Negative body image, you will see here, can lead to shame, guilt, and of course, an overall maybe lack of confidence. This negativity can contribute to our overall sense of negative well-being. And this can, of course, lead to a low mood. And it should be noted that when you're experiencing a low mood, you're more inclined to compare yourself to others. You might compare yourself to what you see on social media, maybe comparing yourself more to your peers and people in your daily life. So at BodyWhys, we want people to be aware that, of course, often what you see portrayed by the media, by social media, by others on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, it can be unrealistic. And that's where we ask you, of course, to be mindful for yourself, have some self-compassion, be compassionate for yourself. A healthy body image leads to self-respect, higher self-esteem, and of course, overall positive emotions. So Fiona has developed our brilliant body image website. You can see the link below there. And this website was designed, and it is extensively used around Ireland by teachers, parents, youth workers, teenagers, to educate and promote healthy body image. So you can find all her resources using that link on the slide. So support and the support that we provide at BodyWhys. So I guess we provide a range of non-judgmental listening services, information, and of course support. We run webinars like this one, professional training, and we also have a range of information that you can explore, of course, on our website. So I know it can be difficult to reach out for support, and I'm just going to break down the list of resources that you can utilize at any stage with BodyWhys. So here on this slide, you will see all the support services that we have. We operate, of course, a helpline service, and this can be utilized by anybody affected by an eating disorder, whether it's the person themselves, parents, relatives, friends, anyone. You'll see the number here on the screen, 01 210 7906. But don't worry, at the end of this webinar, I will have a QR code available on the closing slide that will link you directly to all these contact information. Next, you'll see our email support service. Again, it can be used by anybody, the person themselves, families, friends, relatives, anybody affected by an eating disorder. And that operates every single day, and you can contact alex at bodywhys.ie. And here you can type out your concerns or any guidance that you're looking for, and Alex will get back to you as soon as possible with support. Of course, we host support groups, and they're all held online at the moment. These support groups are hugely popular, and again, you can contribute as much as you like or as little as you like. You can just attend just to listen to maybe peers that might be in a similar situation to you. And you'll see on the screen here that we have an adult BodyWhys Connect for 19 years and over. And then, of course, we provide a Youth Connect on Sunday evenings for anybody between the ages of 13 to 18. And you will find all of our registry information on our website. So our Pillar Support Program is hugely popular, and it is a free 4-week consecutive online program to educate parents, family, friends, and relatives on how to support somebody in their life with an eating disorder. You will learn about dealing with routines and meal times, communication, active listening skills, and how to manage at home, and more extensive detail on the overall recovery process. So as you can see on the screen here, our next Pillar program is starting on March 24th. It's an evening program from 7 to 9 once a week for 4 weeks. And if you are interested in attending, you can email Christopher at pillar@bodywhys.ie. And once you complete the 4-week Pillar program, you can, of course, graduate and use our post-Pillar support group. So the support is always ongoing. So if you do decide to join the Pillar support group, we will provide consistent support from there forwards. So a little bit about recovery in general. As you can imagine, the road to recovery with any mental health illness, it's not linear. There will be bumps along the way. There will be ups and downs. It's a process of expanding one's toolkit with other coping mechanisms and trying to move away from the eating disorder as the focal coping mechanism in someone's life. For the person, it will involve internal awareness and trust within themselves to live without the eating disorder. And as you can see here, recovery begins with acknowledging that something is not quite right. So it's the person themselves acknowledging that there might be an issue going on. So what we suggest is, if you're supporting someone who might be seeking recovery, is to try listen to a person's feelings and their emotions rather than focusing in on their behavior. This will allow you to distinguish between the person and the eating disorder voice. For accurate treatment pathways in Ireland, we've developed a brand new updated treatment guide that was published last year. And we have a downloadable PDF on our website where you can explore both the private and the public pathways to treatment to recovery in Ireland. And our final bullet point there, and it's taking home the message, our ethos, our vision at BodyWhys is that recovery is possible. People can and do get better. And as promised, there's the QR code. So if you want to take out your phones on the camera, hone it in on that QR code and it will link you directly to our website support services. But if you have any questions, again, I will link Sophie from EggHeadz, all of our contact information. And I hope you gained something tonight from this webinar. little bit more understanding about eating disorders, and that there is support, there is help out there if you need it yourself or if you're supporting someone. But I want to thank Sophie again for getting us involved in tonight's webinar series, and thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions whatsoever about any of this content, about any of our services, you can email me on info, so info, @bodywhys.ie. Thank you.